Hello, friends. Welcome back to Heartscapes, where we're learning the system of Reiki to be rooted, to be spacious, to be connected, and to remember ourselves. My name is Michaela. I'm glad to have you back with me. Each season here at Heartscapes, we offer a 21-day Reiki practice journey focusing on a particular concept or philosophical point or set of practices that form the foundation of the system of Reiki from the perspective of its Japanese origins. This time for spring, we are working with the concept and the philosophy of Sanmitsu, the three mystic practices of body, voice, and mind. We are here at the end of our second week in this video. If you're just now tuning into this series, I'll put a playlist down below where you can get caught up. But we've been working through practices this week that lead with the voice and with the breath, always integrating the body and the mind along with it, but leading with the breath and with the voice. Now, primarily within the system of Reiki and within the Buddhist and Shinto underpinnings of the system, that often means using mantra, working with chanting, with the recitation of sacred sounds or syllables in a rhythmic pattern. Today, I wanted to explore other ways of using the voice. Mantra is a powerful tool. It's a powerful point of focus with deep, deep traditions, but it's not the only way in which we can use our breath and our voice within our practice. Firstly, there isn't always the opportunity to literally use our actual voice. Sometimes we have physical limitations or context limitations where chanting or working with mantra is not available to us. So some alternatives for working with the voice include just making a low humming sound, a low toning sound. It can include speaking rather than chanting, speaking out loud a poem or a story. It can also involve recruiting other sound tools to help us to create the sound, such as a drum or a bell or any other sound tool that can create a rhythm and that can create a vibration. So there's many ways in which we can work with the voice. And in today's practice, we want to introduce another one of those ways that has deep roots within the system of Reiki, and that is working with waka poetry. So the composition and contemplation of poetry as a creative, imaginative, metaphoric, spiritual practice exists in many traditions, and it exists in the traditions that form the basis of the system of Reiki. Within that system, we would be looking at the form of poetry known as waka. Waka has existed in Japan in various forms for a very long time, since around the 7th century. And in the era that Mikao Usui lived, in the era of the Meiji Emperor, there was a form of waka that was really strongly used and popularized, in particular by the emperor and his wife. And the use of poetry within spiritual practice became very, very commonplace. Now, why would it be valuable or important to work with poetry within the system of Reiki or any other spiritual system? I think there could be a lot of layers of this answer, and I'm not going to claim to be able to share all of them or even to know all of them. But I can tell you from my own personal experience that the impact of working with poetic verse, with imaginative uses of language, and the way in which the turn of a phrase can open up pathways in the imagination that cause us to not only consider our life differently, consider the world differently, perhaps open doors to aspects of life that we hadn't considered before. But it can also have a physiological effect on our body when we speak, write, contemplate, hear these types of verse. When we hear a verse that speaks of wide open spaciousness and describes a scene of beauty and expansiveness, we can feel that in our body. Our imagination cues that feeling of spaciousness into our nervous system, and we can feel it. Similarly, descriptions of dark or constricted or frightening places can have that physiological impact on our bodies. And so what sorts of poetry, what sorts of poetic verse would be used within the system of Reiki? It's reported by those who have studied the time of Usui and the work that he created that Usui used over 100 different waka poems in his practice. And these would be verses that brought to mind and the imagination the sorts of imagery and sensations that are linked to the outcomes of the system of Reiki. In other words, images that cause us to feel rooted and connected to the ground, feel stable and held and nourished. Images of spaciousness, of vastness, of wide openness, and images of connection and interconnection among all life. And when we look at the natural world as a metaphor for our internal experience, there are endless possibilities with how we might describe the internal experience through observations of the natural world. And that's what we see time and again in these types of poems. Images of the natural world described in such a way that we can feel the reflections of them in our internal landscape, our internal experience. And so there's this connection made between the external landscape that we move through in time and space and the internal landscape of our physical body, of our emotional body, our mental body, and our energetic body. It can be a very powerful practice to be inside of. So, how might we use these poems in our Reiki practice? Well, there's a couple of different ways. And really, it falls down on either side of using the voice, practices that lead with the voice, and practices that lead with the mind, which is where we'll shift into next week. And there's many close interconnections between these practices, as you have probably noticed if you've been walking through these videos with us. So on the side of working with the voice, of course, we can recite these poems. We can feel the vibration of the words in our body. We can hear them with our ears and notice the sensation of receiving the ideas from that poetry in our body. We can work with the physiological sensation of working with the voice and the internal sensation of receiving those words as a practice. On the other side, we can use it as a contemplation practice. We can listen to the words spoken or speak them ourselves and allow them to permeate our psyche and to really notice what kinds of thoughts and feelings arise when we work with that poem, when we receive it, when we take it in. And truly, this is often what we do when we read poetry anyway. I feel like this is really a big part of the purpose of working with poetry in any capacity, is that there's something about the way that poetic verse versus other kinds of writing is structured that brings us naturally into a state of contemplation, naturally into a state of reflection on self, on our experience, on the world around us. It is a natural entry point to self-reflective spiritual practices. And so it's no surprise that it shows up here in our practice. And so for our practice today, I'm going to guide us into a resting, breathing practice as we have been doing this whole time. And I'm going to bring up on the screen a particular waka poem that is believed to be associated with Usui and his work with Reiki. And after we've dropped into our breathing practice, I'm going to recite the poem, and you're welcome to recite it with me. The words will be on the screen. And we'll just sit with that recitation for a few breaths, and then we'll recite it again. And we'll do that about 3 or 4 times. While we're doing that, we'll be in a simple breathing visualization, an extension of the Joshin Kokyu Hara breathing, the belly breathing that we've been using this whole time. And in this case, we're going to just gently follow the breath with our attention. So resting our mind on the movement of the breath down into our belly. And then from the belly, we're going to just pay attention to the movement of the breath back up the body. And then we're going to imagine that breath branching off here at the heart. This is going to follow the heart meridian, where it branches at the heart, runs under the underside of the arms and into the palms of the hands, which will be in Gasso at our hearts. And so just as we're breathing, as we're letting the words of this poem just sit inside of us, we're going to be following our breath in this pattern, just imagining the breath moving down and into the hara, and then back up the center of the body, branching off at the heart, running down the undersides of our hands or our arms into our hands, which will be clasped ekaso at our hearts. And then as we inhale, the breath will move back down the undersides of our arms, back down the center of our body. All right, so we're going to start with getting our body settled into a position for practice, feeling the stability of the foundation below us, the structures we're sitting upon, the structure of our body. Allowing ourselves to feel well held and well supported so that our bellies can be soft and expansive. Moving with the breath gently, contracting gently as we exhale. Bringing our breath and our body into this relaxed and supported posture. Easefully upright, well supported on a firm foundation, and relaxed in the muscles of our belly and our shoulders so that the breath can move freely in and down. And bringing our mind into this posture, resting our attention on the sensation of the inhale, moving in and down, coming into the belly, drawing our attention down into the nourishing darkness of our belly. Just taking a few breaths to settle into this pattern, resting our attention on the sensation of the breath, allowing that sensation to draw us inward, to draw our focus back from all the places we've spent it today, and to come into our center, our rooted and grounded place. And resting here for a few rounds of breath. And bringing your hands up to Gasso at your heart, prayer position. Beginning to follow your breath in and down. And on your next exhale, following the sensation of the breath moving back up the center of your body. And then imagining your breath moving down your arms and into your hands. And then as you inhale, following the breath back down your arms, down the center of your body and into your belly. And if it's helpful to imagine a spark of light or a golden ball in lieu of the breath, that can be helpful to rest your mind, your attention on an image like that. Let's do a few rounds of breath in this way. And then as your mind travels the meridian of your heart, I invite you to listen or speak these words. Like a great sky in clear light green, I wish my heart would be as vast. Like a great sky in clear light green, I wish my heart would be as vast. Continuing to breathe into your belly and back out to your hands. Allowing these words to follow your breath in and down, drawing them inside of you as you recite, like a great sky in clear light green. I wish my heart would be as vast. Just allowing this imagery to be with you, just letting it work inside of you as you continue to breathe into your belly and out to your hands. Letting your breath draw your attention inward. As you recite once more, like a great sky in clear light green, I wish my heart would be as vast. And just noticing what comes into your mind, into your body, to your heart, as this poem moves inside of you. Taking 5 more breaths in this way. Like a great sky in clear light green, I wish my heart would be as vast. And then releasing your hands to rest in your lap, just resting here for another breath. Perhaps allowing yourself to feel the vastness of the great sky within you. Knowing your heartscape to be as vast as this great sky. And then when you feel ready, bringing your hands back to Gasso in a gesture of gratitude and completion. Welcome back. Thank you for joining me for another practice session. I've really been enjoying this series, really been valuable to spiral back around this concept, this philosophy of Sanmitsu, and to really embody it, to bring it into daily practice, to see the deeper layers of connection between these relatively simple concepts of body, voice, and mind. There is so much vastness here. So often, the practices that can take us to the deepest places are themselves profoundly simple. This is one of the things that I find most exquisite about the system of Reiki. The practices are exquisitely simple, and yet they can take us to very deep places. They can be very challenging because they require our diligence and our attention. They require us to be able to focus our attention on the practice for a sustained period of time, perhaps just 5 minutes or 10 minutes, perhaps an hour, perhaps a day, perhaps years. We get to choose. We get to be in relationship with these practices to the degree that they serve us. And that's part of the intention of these 21-day practices, to really give us an opportunity to fully sink into practice and develop our relationship with it, to make decisions about how we want that relationship to look moving forward based on the outcomes that we experience when we devote ourselves to practice for a period of time. And having been in these practices for years now, I've seen incredible change in my mindset, my emotional life, my physical health, my relational health in particular, the health of my relationships, particularly my relationship to myself, starting there, flowing from there out to others. It's an incredible amount of change over time from simple, consistent practice. So I offer that to you. I offer a container for you to step inside of that relationship, to build it, develop it, however it serves you. And occasionally, these 21-day practices we share here on YouTube. We did one other version on YouTube, which also was focused on poetry, 21 Days of Poetry. I'll put the playlist to that one as well if you want to get into a little bit more poetic contemplation. We use a wide range of poetry in that series from many genres, from many poets, contemporary and traditional, ancient, from all over the world. There's guests that join me in that one that share poetry that has been important to them. It's a really lovely series. So I'll put that playlist down below. And I'll also put information about how you can register to be in these 21-day practices live the next time we offer it, which will be towards the summer solstice. And until then, and until our next practice session, may you be well provisioned for wherever your journey takes you today. Thanks for joining me. I love you. Goodbye.